It's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the CURT Trailer Hitch receiver on a 2021 Ford Transit T350. We see a lot of Transit T350s that come through eTrailer on a pretty regular basis, and whether they're for van lifing and camping or a work vehicle like we have today, adding a hitch to one is a great idea. A lot of these have serious towing capacity, so if you plan on pulling a trailer or even just loading up accessories, adding a hitch is definitely a must to one of these, and this is a great option. Now, seeing what it looks like on the Transit, it's a pretty clean look overall. The 2" by 2" receiver tube opening does sit a little bit recessed, and really you can't see much of the hitch once it's installed. On a vehicle like this, you're really probably not worried too much about the appearance of it, but this one, with 2" by 2", that's kind of the standard size for a trailer hitch receiver. So plenty of options when it comes to any accessories, ball mounts, bike racks, whatever it may be. No matter the accessories, all of them are going to stay in place with a 5/8 pin and clip. And this is not going to be included with the hitch. A lot of times when you pick up accessories, they'll have them included. If you plan on leaving any of your accessories or ball mounts on the back of your Transit, I highly recommend getting a locking pin and clip. It becomes a good deterrent for anyone that might see an accessory and they won't be able to just take the pin out and walk away with it. We have a plate style safety chain loop, and these are a little bit of an oval shape. That's going to allow you to get a standard S hook on there. Even a larger clevis style will go on there. It's a little tight, but it shouldn't be a problem being able to hook up your chains from your trailer. If you're planning on towing anything with your Transit, this is a fantastic hitch to get. The capacities are extremely high. Gross trailer weight rating out the gate, which is going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded, is 8,000 pounds. So pretty heavy duty. Tongue weight is also significant with 800 pounds, and that's the downward pressure that's put on the inside of the receiver tube opening. So a lot of times it'll be suspended accessories, cargo carriers, and bike racks with 800 pounds. Highly doubt that you're ever going to go over that weight limit without exceeding any of those accessories first. Can be used with a weight distribution hitch. If you're trying to get a little bit more, you can get 10,000 pounds for gross trailer weight rating, and your tongue weight actually goes up to 1,000 pounds. So overall, really heavy duty hitch and super easy installation overall as well. But let's make sure that this is going to be a good fit for you and your accessories. And what that means is some of your folding accessories, cargo carriers, and bike racks, when they're stowed in a vertical position, sometimes they can run into the rear bumper. So measuring from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point, it's 4 inches. I don't worry too much that you'll have any issues. You won't probably be able to open up your rear doors, but you can always fold those down and then you'll have full access. As far as ground clearance goes, top of the receiver tube opening to the ground, we have 16 inches, and that's pretty solid. That's going to be really important when choosing a ball mount to hook up to a trailer. You can measure from the ground to the top of the coupler of your trailer when it's nice and level. Compare that with the 16 inches and then do the math to figure out the rise or drop necessary to get a nice level load while towing. Now in terms of installation, this one is fairly easy to do. Our Transit that we had today, I think had maybe a collision at some point, so our frame rails were just a little bit off, which made it a little more difficult. I've done plenty of other Transit hitches that are very similar to this, and none of them are too terribly bad to do. You're going to be using some of the factory bolts that are already there, and then fish wiring new ones in. Now you will have to drill out one hole spot and then enlarge another to get some of that hardware to drop in, but overall, with the clearance that you have on this, you can definitely do this in a driveway or garage. Probably give yourself maybe an hour and you'll have it installed, and then from there on, you'll be able to use your hitch whenever you need to. So if you're installing this yourself, follow along and I'll show you step by step how to get it installed. Now, if you decide after watching the video that maybe you don't have the tools to do it, the want to do it, maybe the space, whatever it may be, if this isn't for you, that's totally fine. You can reach out to our dealer locator and find someone close to you to get your hitch installed, and that way you can utilize it just the same and really enjoy what you can do with your Transit with that hitch installed. So let's take a look at that. To begin our installation, the first thing that you're going to want to do is get your spare tire lowered down and out of the way. And in order to accomplish that, you can open up the rear doors. There's going to be a plastic cap that's going to allow you to spin that down and remove your spare tire. Ours is already missing, so we don't have to worry about that step, but it's really just going to give you a lot more space to be able to work under here. Once you have your spare tire out of the way, next thing we're going to be tackling are going to be the 2 bolts on each side. So as this goes up to the frame, these bolts go all the way through, and they can be pretty tricky to get off. So if you need to, you could spray a little bit of penetrating oil on these to get them loose. I'm going to be using a 15mm socket on an impact to get those taken out. swapped over to a 1/2-inch ratchet that's pretty long here. You might need a breaker bar. These things are in there pretty good, especially if they're going to be caked up a little bit with just road grime. It can be a little bit tricky. So just take your time here, making sure we get these completely out. On your driver's side, you may have a bracket for your pedestrian alarm. There is going to be a nut that you're going to want to put an 18mm socket on to keep that from spinning, and then you should be able to get the hardware out. Now on the passenger side, we have a tow hook, and if yours has a tow hook, you're going to want to get this removed because our hitch is going to go right on the frame rail. So take these bolts out and we should be able to get this to drop down. 15mm socket is going to accomplish that. If this, where we had those 2 bolts go through, if this is caked up like ours is, we're going to need to knock all this loose because we're going to be passing our hardware through there to be able to bolt up the hitch. I'm going to just take a pry bar and just work all this buildup out of there. Variances between the Transit could change this step for you. On our driver's side, there's going to be a small hole that's already there. It's about 1/8 of an inch diameter, and we're going to be enlarging this to 9/16, or large enough to get our carriage bolt to pass through. We're also going to be passing hardware into the back holes with our spacer blocks, and then we're going to be reusing the factory bolts to run them back through the frame rail. So with that, we're going to get everything mocked up hardware-wise and leave this last hole, and we'll use the hitch as our template to figure out exactly where we want to drill. So first things first, let's get this hole enlarged with our 9/16 drill bit. Grab your carriage bolt, make sure that this passes through nice and clean and easily. So I'll have to enlarge ours just a little bit to be able to get our carriage bolt to pass through, but make sure that it's easily able to be dropped in. We can get our hardware in place. We're going to be using our spacer block, a pull wire, as well as our carriage bolt. So what we'll do is take the coiled portion, feed that through the hole that we enlarged, and this will come out at the outside of the frame rail. So from here, we'll take our spacer block. We can feed that into place. Just make sure it drops in. It's kind of a tight fit here, so you may have to kind of rotate this a little bit until it's able to drop into the spot. We still have quite a bit of dirt here. And then we'll take our carriage bolt. We're going to thread this onto that coiled section and then feed this in. Same thing, you may have to kind of guide it in with your hands. And it's pretty tight here for the carriage bolt to drop in. There's a portion of the frame that kind of bends up that's going to create a little bit of a tight spot here. So just take your time and try to get this to jostle through that spacer block. With a little bit of maneuvering around, as I mentioned, you're probably going to want that spacer block to slide up on the carriage bolt in order for this to drop down. And to tell you the truth, I think the best option to make this a lot easier, it's kind of wedged here, but as you're drilling out that 9/16 hole, go a little bit larger, and that's going to give you a little bit more wiggle room for this to drop in, and also allow this pull wire to slide through here. So a little bit of a tight fit, but once we get the threads to drop in, we'll be looking good. Okay. Now this was really tricky. It's just tight. So if I could recommend anything besides enlarging this hole, you might want to put that spacer block on the carriage bolt and feed it in one go. Otherwise it starts to bind. But now that we have this one in place, we'll get our rear ones put in place. This one's going to be a lot easier. This one you could get away with not using a pull wire, but it's nice for when raising the hitch in place. This will keep it to where it's not going to push back in the frame rail. So we'll just feed this back here, spacer block, carriage bolt, and then we'll just drop this in place. And then we can repeat on the other side. We're going to be reusing those long bolts that we took out from the 2 holes, and what I'm going to do is raise this up with an extra set of hands and get the bolts passed back in, at least on the back side, so it'll hold itself up, and then we can raise that hitch up, and we can worry about these fish wires a little bit later. So first thing, grab an extra set of hands. Each person has a bolt, and then as we raise this up, we'll just align the back, or the forwardmost hole, pass that through, get a few threads started. And that'll hold that in place. Grab the pull wire from the forwardmost hole and push that through the bracket on our hitch. And that way, as we raise this up, we should be able to get that to drop through. You may need to kind of slightly get this to where it slides forward to get this in by pushing this up, but we should be able to get it to align. It's pretty tight here. Something that we ran into while trying to get this in place was it was extremely tight on the frame rails, and normally a dead blow hammer will get it knocked up, but this one I believe was in an accident at some point, so it made it very, very tight. And if you're running into that same issue where it's just binding up against the inside portion, what I recommend doing is putting a floor jack underneath the hitch, and you can start raising that up. Now, we actually had to put some people in the back and jump to get that to drop into place. It was extremely tight. But a floor jack is going to be the best way to do that. And once you get it raised up enough to get the long bolts passed through, this is a good time to get them snugged down. And the reason being is as we draw these in, that's going to help align these slots a little bit better for our hardware to drop through. So important as you get all the stuff kind of in place is making sure that you have those coal wires fed through those brackets. So from this point, I'm just going to snug these down, try to get these to drop through, and make sure that we have all of our studs ready to go in the hitch mounting holes. Now with those dropped down, we're going to put our serrated flange nuts in place, and you got to kind of play it as far as trying to get all the hardware ran in. This one, it's just not dropping down enough. There's a gap in between the bracket and the frame rail. So using the hardware on the back side to draw that up will allow this to drop in place. So really just try to get all your hardware started. If you need to, you can back out those bolts once you have these in place. But again, just having those serrated flange nuts started on the 3 studs is going to help us get this nice and flush so we can drill that hole out to put our other hardware in place as well. With my 3 serrated flange nuts all started, I'm going to snug them down using a 3/4 inch socket. And really what I'm trying to do here is get this drawn up nice and flush, and that way we can drill that hole out. It'll be a good template for it. So no need to get crazy. We'll come back with a torque wrench a little bit later. Now I drew all these up, and this is about as good as it's going to get, at least with our frame being a little bit out of whack. But this is going to give us that template. I'll be drilling this out, and then we'll be feeding the hardware in just like we did on the other side. And I think that's, once we get that stud pushed through with that pull wire, we can get that serrated flange nut, and this will draw up as we tighten it. So go ahead, get that drilled out just like we did on the other hole. Now that did draw that up exactly how we wanted it. At this point, we're going to go through, snug down all of the hardware, including our bolts that we passed through the frame rail, and then we'll grab our torque wrench and come back and get them torqued down. And when torquing these down, there's going to be 2 different torque settings. So the new hardware that we put in is going to have a slightly higher torque setting than the factory bolts that go through. So make sure that you're changing your torque wrench accordingly and just follow the instruction manuals for those torque settings. If you need a torque wrench, we have them available here at eTrailer. You can generally go to an auto parts store and rent one for free. I recommend starting on the bottom ones, make sure that it draws up all the way first, and then we can work our way up towards the ones that go through the frame. So it's going to be a 3/4 inch socket for our new hardware, and then we'll use a 15mm socket to torque down the bolts that go into the frame. Now with all of our hardware torqued down, don't forget with your pedestrian alarm, put that nut back on to hold that in place. And that was a look and installation of the CURT Trailer Hitch receiver on a 2021 Ford Transit T350.